The battlefield smelled like ozone and copper, which Corporal Ethan Vale had learned was the scent of recent violence mixed with environmental systems struggling to process the aftermath. Driva VII's thin atmosphere made everything sharper, sounds carried farther, smells lingered longer, and death felt more immediate than on worlds with proper air to dilute it. Ethan moved through the crater field with his rifle ready and his nerves frayed, part of the cleanup operation after what military briefings were calling a tactical engagement, and everyone else called a clusterfuck. His squad had been ambushed 6 hours ago. Half were dead. The rest scattered across terrain that looked like someone had taken a moon and systematically destroyed its aesthetic value. The Savathi ascendancy had hit them hard and fast, their warriors moving with the kind of coordinated precision that came from centuries of martial tradition. Humans had better technology in some areas, but the Savathi had something harder to quantify, an absolute certainty in their cause that made them terrifying opponents. Now both sides were picking through the wreckage, following the fragile rules of engagement that theoretically prevented border skirmishes from escalating into full war. Theoretically. Got another one, Lieutenant Morrison called from 30 meters ahead. Savathi, still breathing, looks command-dranked. Ethan approached carefully. The Savathi warrior was collapsed in a crater, her armor shattered in ways that suggested she'd taken a direct hit from something explosive. Her iridescent skin, normally shifting through blues and silvers, was mottled gray, the color of severe shock and blood loss. She was also definitely command-ranked based on the insignia still visible on her chest plate. Captain, maybe higher. That made her valuable for intelligence purposes, which meant they were supposed to stabilize her and call for prisoner transport. Ethan knelt beside her, checking vitals through his scanner. Pulse weak but present. Breathing shallow. Multiple trauma. She needed medical attention soon or she'd die right here in this crater on a moon neither species had particularly wanted until corporations decided it was profitable to fight over. Her eyes opened. They were a deep violet that shifted toward gray as she focused on him. Savathi biology expressing pain and resignation through color changes that Ethan's briefing materials had covered, but never quite prepared him for. She looked at him, at his rifle, at the tactical team securing the area, at the reality of her situation with the kind of clarity that came from accepting death. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper, rough with pain but steady. Please. Just make it quick. The words were in standard, accented but clear. She was asking him to execute her, not pleading, not begging, just requesting efficiency in the inevitable. Ethan's finger was on the trigger. His training said hostile combatants in contested zones fell under fluid engagement protocols. His experience said nobody would question it if he followed through. The Savathi themselves would probably approve. Their warrior culture considered capture shameful, death in combat honorable. He looked at her face, at the resignation in her eyes, at the way she'd already let go of fighting because she knew resistance was pointless. Something in him just refused. He lowered his rifle and keyed his comm. Morrison, I need medical evac at my position. Priority casualty. The channel went silent for 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours. Say again, Corporal. Medical evac. We've got a high-value prisoner who needs stabilization. Vale, are you? Morrison caught himself. Confirmed, evac inbound. Ethan looked back at the Savathi captain. Her expression had shifted from resignation to absolute confusion, her skin flickering through colors he couldn't interpret. Why? She asked, the word coming out like she was testing a foreign concept. Because you asked me to make it quick, Ethan said, and killing someone who's already defeated felt wrong. Her eyes searched his face like she was looking for deception, for hidden motives, for anything that would make his actions make sense within her understanding of how wars worked. She didn't find it. Neither did Ethan, really. He just made a choice based on instinct rather than training, and he had no idea what the consequences would be. The medical team arrived and began stabilization procedures. The Savathi captain, her ID chip identified her as Captain Cirrus Valen, lost consciousness as they loaded her onto the transport. Morrison pulled Ethan aside while the medics worked. "You want to explain what just happened?" "I spared a prisoner for intelligence purposes." "You spared a Savathi captain who asked for execution. Do you have any idea how they're going to interpret that?" "No, sir, do you?" Morrison's expression suggested he didn't, and that bothered him considerably. "This is going to create complications, Vale. Command is already asking questions." He was right. The complications started before they'd even transported Cirrus back to the forward operating base. The medical facility on Firebase Torch was designed for human physiology, with hasty modifications for treating captured Savathi. Captain Cirrus Valen woke on a bed that was slightly wrong for her proportions, in a room that smelled of antiseptic and recycled air, restrained but alive. Alive. That fact kept circling through her thoughts like a malfunctioning targeting system. She should be dead. By every doctrine drilled into her since childhood, she should have died in that crater, either fighting to the last breath or executed quickly by an enemy who understood that mercy prolonged suffering. Instead, she was a prisoner. Captured, alive through an act of compassion that made no sense within any framework she understood. The human who'd spared her, Corporal Ethan Vale according to the name on his uniform, stood outside her room talking to what appeared to be a medical officer. Even restrained and recovering, Cirrus's tactical training cataloged details. Vale was mid-20s, human standard, moved with the careful awareness of experienced soldiers, and kept glancing at her through the observation window like he was trying to understand his own decision. A cultural liaison entered her room an hour later. Human, female, wearing civilian clothes that suggested diplomatic corps rather than military. She introduced herself as Dr. Keiko Osman, specialist in human Savathi relations. "Captain Valen," she said carefully, "we need to discuss what happened on Driva VII. I asked for execution. Your soldier refused. I'm now a prisoner." Cirrus's voice was still weak but functional. "There's nothing to discuss." "Actually, there's everything to discuss." Dr. Osman activated a datapad. "Are you familiar with the mercy rite?" Cirrus felt her skin shift toward the pale colors that indicated shock. That's archaic. Nobody has invoked the mercy rite in decades. Corporal Vale invoked it 3 hours ago, whether he knew it or not. When a warrior spares an enemy who has accepted death, especially one of rank, Savathi law recognizes it as creating a consort-witness bond. Both parties gain legal standing in each other's governance structures. That's impossible. He's human. He can't invoke Savathi law through ignorance. Intent matters more than knowledge in the mercy rite. He spared you when execution was both expected and permitted. Under your own legal traditions, that creates binding obligations. Cirrus struggled against the restraints, not to escape, but because she needed to move, to process, to do anything besides lie still while her world inverted. This is a mistake. He didn't understand what he was doing. Probably not, but the act still happened. Dr. Osman's expression was sympathetic but firm. Your own government has already been notified. They've invoked protocols demanding either your return for honorable execution or our execution of you to fulfill combat requirements. We've refused both. Then you're violating the terms of engagement. We're invoking the mercy rite, which supersedes standard combat protocols. Your government's legal scholars are arguing about it right now, but the tradition is clear enough that they can't simply dismiss it. A different officer entered, human military colonel's insignia, expression suggesting he'd rather be literally anywhere else. "Captain Valen, I'm Colonel Hayes. This situation is unprecedented. I need to know if you're claiming the mercy rite is legitimate." Cirrus looked at him, then at Dr. Osman, then through the window at Corporal Vale, who was still standing in the corridor looking lost. "I don't know," she admitted. The right exists in our law, but it was created for Savathi civil conflicts, not interspecies relations. Applying it here is legally ambiguous. That's what I was afraid of. Hayes rubbed his face. Both our governments are in crisis mode. You're too valuable for intelligence, too dangerous to return, and now apparently too complicated to simply hold as a standard prisoner. And Corporal Vale has managed to create a diplomatic incident by having a conscience at an inconvenient moment. He left and Cirrus was alone with Dr. Osman again. "Can I speak with him?" Cirrus asked. "With Corporal Vale." "You're a prisoner technically, but also technically a consort witness. The legal status is fluid." Dr. Osman made a decision. "Yes, supervised, monitored, but yes. Maybe you can both figure out what this means." They brought Ethan to a secured conference room 30 minutes later. He looked as confused as Cirrus felt, which was oddly reassuring. "Captain Valen," he said formally. "Corporal Vale." She studied him across the table, her skin unconsciously cycling through analytical colors. "I'm told you've accidentally invoked ancient Savathi law by refusing to kill me. So they keep explaining. I'm still processing how 'don't shoot someone who's already defeated' became a binding legal relationship. The mercy right was created during our Third Civil War. Warriors from opposing factions needed a way to build bridges without betraying their sides. Sparing an enemy who had accepted death created mutual obligation. The sparer became responsible for the spared, and both gained standing to advocate for the other's people. That actually makes sense as conflict resolution, weird as it sounds. It made sense for Savathi fighting Savathi. Applying it to human Savathi relations is, she searched for the word, unprecedented. That's been the theme of my day. Ethan leaned back in his chair. "Can I ask you something? When you asked me to make it quick, did you actually want to die?" Cirrus considered the question honestly. "I wanted the uncertainty over. I've been taught my entire life that capture was shame, that dying in combat was honor. So yes, I wanted you to finish it." She paused. "But when you didn't, when you called for medical assistance instead, part of me was relieved." Which made no sense, still makes no sense. "What if," Ethan said slowly, "the relief makes more sense than the doctrine?" Before Cirrus could answer, alarms sounded. Security protocols activated. Dr. Osman burst into the room with armed guards. "We have a breach. Someone tried to access Corporal Vale's quarters with modified weapons. They're in custody now, but..." She looked at both of them. This just became more complicated. The attacker turned out to be human, a maintenance contractor with connections to defense corporations that profited from the border conflict. Preliminary interrogation suggested he'd been paid to eliminate Corporal Vale before the mercy rite could be formally sanctified. Cirrus processed this information from her medical room while enhanced security surrounded both her and Ethan. "Your own people tried to kill you for showing mercy. Apparently, peace is bad for certain profit margins," Ethan said through the secured comm channel. "Seems we're both targets now." "The right creates obligations," Cirrus said, her tactical mind already analyzing the implications. "If consort witnesses are meant to build bridges between sides, then those profiting from conflict would want to prevent the right from being sanctified." "Great, so we've got enemies on both sides who want us dead. This just keeps getting better." Despite everything, Cirrus found herself almost smiling, a human expression she'd learned but rarely used. "Welcome to having actually threatened the status quo, Corporal. It's traditionally fatal." "Well," Ethan said, "at least we're in this together, that's something." It was something. Cirrus wasn't sure what yet, but it was definitely something. Ethan spent his 72-hour assessment period in a state of controlled paranoia. His quarters had been moved 3 times after security sweeps found additional threats. A compromised air filter, surveillance equipment hidden in the lighting panels, and what demolitions experts identified as a remotely triggered explosive disguised as standard furniture. Someone really wanted him dead, and they had access that should have been impossible. Cirrus was dealing with similar issues. Her medical room had been swept twice after anomalies appeared in her treatment protocols. Subtle changes to medication that would have looked like standard human Savathi physiology incompatibility, but were actually designed to induce system failure. They met daily in a secured conference room that was probably the most thoroughly scanned space in the entire firebase. Dr. Osmond supervised initially, but after the third day, she mostly left them alone with just security monitoring. "Your people are trying to kill you too," Ethan observed during their fourth meeting. Cirrus's skin had settled into troubled blue-gray tones that he'd learned indicated stress. High Command transmitted orders. "I'm to reject the mercy rite, claim cultural misunderstanding, and accept honorable execution to prevent political complications." Her expression was carefully neutral. "I refused." "Why?" "Because I've had 3 days to review intelligence files you've been granted access to through your consort witness standing. Files showing how many of our border conflicts were manufactured, how many casualties were unnecessary." Her skin darkened toward colors he couldn't quite interpret. "My government told me humans were honorless aggressors. Your intelligence suggests that assessment was propaganda designed to maintain profitable tension." Ethan pulled up his own files, financial records that Cirrus's status as consort witness gave her legal right to review. Human contractors coordinating with Savathi military suppliers. Both sides making billions by keeping the conflict active but contained. Peace would cost them their revenue streams. They worked in silence for a while, cross-referencing data from both sides, building a picture of conspiracy that neither government wanted exposed. "This is why they want us dead," Cirrus said finally. "The mercy rite grants us standing to see each other's intelligence. If we actually use that standing, we'll expose the people profiting from our war." "Yeah." Ethan looked at the evidence they'd compiled. "So what do we do? If we disavow the right, this all goes away and the conspiracy continues. If we ratify it, we're signing our death warrants." "They'll kill us either way," Cirrus said with the calm certainty of someone who'd done tactical analysis. "Disavowal makes us no longer useful as targets, but it also means we know too much about the conspiracy and represent loose ends. Ratification makes us legitimate threats they have to eliminate. Either path ends with assassination attempts." "Comforting. I'm a military officer. Comfort isn't my specialty." She studied the data displays. "But if we're targets regardless, we might as well make it count." Ethan met her eyes across the table. "You're suggesting we go through with the sanctification ceremony and present the evidence publicly." "I'm suggesting that the mercy rite was designed to build bridges between warring factions. We have evidence that our factions are being manipulated into warfare by people who profit from our deaths. Presenting that evidence is exactly what consort witnesses are supposed to do." "It'll probably get us killed." "Yes," Cirrus agreed, "but we'll die having actually threatened the systems that want us dead. That's more than most warriors achieve." Ethan thought about his years of service, following orders, fighting in conflicts he barely understood, losing friends to skirmishes that served corporate interests rather than strategic necessity. He thought about the moment in the crater when Cirrus asked him to make it quick, and his instinctive refusal to reduce her to just another casualty. "Okay," he said, "let's do it. But if we're exposing interstellar conspiracy, I want better coffee. The stuff they serve here tastes like recycled despair." Cirrus's skin flickered briefly toward warmer tones that might have been amusement. "That's your priority, coffee." "If I'm going to die threatening the military-industrial complex, I'm going to do it properly caffeinated." This time she definitely smiled. It looked strange on Savathi features, but genuine. "I'm beginning to understand why you didn't shoot me, Corporal. You're too stubborn to follow sensible doctrine." "Thanks, I think." They spent the next 2 days compiling evidence and preparing their presentation. Dr. Osmond helped, partly because she believed in what they were doing and partly because She was apparently tired of watching interspecies relations being sabotaged by profiteers. Colonel Hayes visited on the final day before the sanctification ceremony. He looked like he'd aged years in a week. "Corporal Vale, I'm here to make you an offer. Disavow the mercy rite. Testify that Captain Valen manipulated you through cultural exploitation. Accept a promotion to lieutenant and reassignment to a safe posting. All charges dropped, career intact. And if I refuse, court-martial for violating engagement protocols. Possibly treason for accepting foreign legal authority without authorization. Your career ends, probably with prison time." Ethan had expected this. "The thing is, Colonel, as consort witness I have legal standing with Savathi governance. Charging me requires acknowledging that standing. If you acknowledge it, you're validating the mercy rite. If you don't, you can't actually prosecute me for accepting foreign authority I don't technically have." Hayes's expression suggested he'd walked into that particular logical trap with full awareness, but had hoped Ethan wouldn't notice. "You've been talking to lawyers. Dr. Osman is very thorough. Also, Cirrus has centuries of Savathi legal precedent memorized, which helps. This will destroy your career." "My career involved guarding doors and fighting in manufactured conflicts designed to profit corporations. I think I can survive destruction." Ethan paused. "With respect, sir, did anyone offer you deals to look the other way? To ignore the evidence we've compiled?" Hayes's silence was answer enough. "Then we're all just trying to figure out how to do the right thing when the systems we serve don't want us to," Ethan said. "I'm choosing to die on this particular hill. You'll have to choose yours." After Hayes left, Cirrus asked through their secured comm channel, "Did you really just lecture a colonel about moral choices?" Apparently stubborn enough to ignore sensible doctrine includes ignoring rank hierarchy. Ethan reviewed their presentation one more time. "How are you doing? Your people threatening you with anything creative?" "Standard threats of dishonor, exile, execution. Nothing unexpected." Her skin flickered through stressed colors. "My commanding officer transmitted personal message. He said I'm bringing shame to our warrior traditions by accepting mercy instead of death." "What did you tell him?" "That maybe our traditions need to include mercy. That honor without compassion is just violence with better marketing." She paused. He did not respond well. "Yeah, that tracks." The sanctification ceremony was scheduled for the following morning at a neutral diplomatic station. Both governments would attend, media would cover it, and Ethan and Cirrus would either change the trajectory of human-Savathi relations or get themselves killed, possibly both. Ethan spent his last evening reviewing the evidence one more time, making sure every connection was documented, every transaction verified. Around midnight, Cirrus contacted him through their secured channel. "Corporal Vale." "Captain Valen. I wanted to say, thank you for sparing me, for choosing mercy when violence was easier, for being willing to die alongside me to expose the truth." Her skin shifted through colors he'd learned meant sincerity mixed with vulnerability. "In my culture, we're taught that warriors honor each other through combat, but you've shown me there's honor in refusing combat too." "You're welcome, and thank you for not thinking I was completely insane for invoking ancient legal traditions through accidental compassion." "Oh, you're definitely insane, but it's productive insanity, which is preferable to the alternative." Ethan smiled. "Get some rest, Cirrus. Tomorrow we threaten the entire military-industrial complex. Should probably be well rested for that." "Agreed. Try not to get assassinated before morning." "Same to you." The last night before everything changed, Ethan lay in his heavily secured quarters and thought about the moment in the crater when he'd chosen mercy over protocol. He still didn't fully understand why he'd made that choice, but he understood its consequences now, and he didn't regret them. Sometimes doing the right thing meant ignoring every piece of training, every doctrine, every sensible voice telling you to just follow orders. Sometimes mercy was the most rebellious act possible. The diplomatic station orbiting Driva VII had been designed by committee, which meant it combined the worst aesthetic choices of multiple species into something that was universally uncomfortable. The sanctification chamber managed to be both too large and too cramped, with seating arrangements that satisfied nobody's cultural preferences and lighting that gave everyone mild headaches. Representatives from both human and Savathi governments filled the gallery. Media drones hovered at approved distances. Security forces from 3 different organizations maintained careful watch, none of them entirely trusting the others. Ethan stood on one side of the ceremonial circle, wearing his dress uniform that had been hastily altered to incorporate Savathi symbolic elements. Cirrus stood opposite him in formal armor that combined traditional Savathi design with concessions to her prisoner status, protective but not weaponized. The ceremony was being presided over by a joint panel. Colonel Hayes representing Human Military Command, High Marshal Creven representing Savathi High Command, and Ambassador Castellan as neutral arbiter from the Interspecies Diplomatic Corps. Ambassador Castellan spoke first, her voice amplified through the chamber's systems. "We are gathered to witness the sanctification of the mercy rite invoked 7 days ago between Corporal Ethan Vale of Humanity and Captain Cirrus Valen of the Savathi Ascendancy. This is an ancient tradition, rarely invoked, but binding under Savathi law and recognized under interspecies treaty provisions." She turned to Ethan. "Corporal Vale, you are required to affirm your intent and explain your reasoning for invoking the mercy rite. Do you affirm that you spared Captain Valen's life, when execution was both permitted and expected under combat protocols?" Ethan took a breath. This was supposed to be the diplomatic answer, something about recognizing shared dignity, seeing common ground, all the polished phrases that Dr. Osman had coached him on. Instead, he told the truth. "I affirm. 7 days ago, Captain Valen asked me to make her execution quick. She'd accepted death and just wanted it over with. I looked at her, wounded, defeated, resigned, and I couldn't do it. Not because I'm particularly noble or enlightened, but because killing someone who'd already stopped fighting felt wrong. So I called for medical evac instead." Murmurs rippled through the gallery. That wasn't the scripted answer. "That decision invoked the mercy rite, apparently," Ethan continued. "I didn't know that at the time. I just knew that following protocol felt more wrong than breaking it. And I've spent the last 7 days learning why that instinct mattered." He activated the central display, and the evidence began appearing. Financial records, communications intercepts, coordinated attack patterns. Colonel Hayes stood immediately. "Corporal, that information is classified. You are not authorized to." "As consort witness, I have legal standing to present evidence relevant to the bond's sanctification," Ethan said, citing the legal precedent Dr. Osman had drilled into him. "This evidence is directly relevant." Ambassador Castellan held up a hand. "Colonel Hayes, the mercy rite does grant presentation rights. Unless you're claiming the right itself is invalid, Corporal Vale may proceed." Hayes sat down, his expression promising future consequences. Ethan continued, walking the assembled officials through the conspiracy they'd uncovered. For the past 3 years, human defense contractors and Savathi military suppliers have been coordinating to maintain the border conflict. Not to win it, not to end it, to maintain it. They've orchestrated attacks designed to look like natural escalation. They've sabotaged peace negotiations through deliberate intelligence failures. They've profited from every casualty on both sides. The gallery erupted in shocked conversation. Media drones focused intently, broadcasting across multiple systems. "Corporal Vale, these are serious accusations," Ambassador Castellan said. "Do you have verification?" "Captain Valen will present the Savathi side of the evidence," Ethan said, stepping back. Cirrus moved forward, her skin shifting through colors that expressed controlled anger. "High Marshal Creven, 3 days ago you transmitted orders for me to reject the mercy rite and accept honorable execution. You claimed it was necessary to preserve military honor and prevent political complications. She activated her own data display, showing Savathi military communications. Here are the real reasons. Your personal financial holdings include substantial investments in companies supplying our military. Every month the border conflict continues generates revenue for those holdings. Peace would cost you billions. Kreven's skin flushed dark red, Savathi biology expressing fury mixed with being caught. Captain Valen, you are making treasonous accusations based on your own communications, Cirrus cut in, which I have legal access to through my consort witness standing. Communications showing coordination with human contractors to ensure the conflict remained profitable, including discussions about eliminating Corporal Vale and myself before we could present this evidence. She displayed the intercepts, encrypted communications between Savathi officers and human corporate interests, coordination of the assassination attempts, explicit discussions about the problem that the mercy right represented to their profitable arrangement. The chamber descended into chaos. Officials were shouting in multiple languages. Security forces moved to detain several people flagged in the evidence. Media drones captured everything, while various governments attempted to invoke security protocols that no longer meant anything now that the information was public. Ambassador Castellan's voice cut through the noise. Order. This proceeding will maintain order. It took several minutes to restore enough quiet for her to continue. This evidence requires extensive investigation. But the question before us now is whether the mercy right will be sanctified. Corporal Vale, Captain Valen, you've presented compelling reasons why powerful interests want to prevent that sanctification. Yes, Ambassador, Ethan said. Because the right grants us legal standing to expose them. Without it, we're just a soldier and a prisoner with stolen intelligence. With it, we're consort witnesses performing exactly the function the right was designed for, building bridges by revealing truth. Castellan looked at both of them for a long moment. Do you both understand that sanctifying this right makes you permanent targets, that you'll spend the rest of your lives navigating dangers from people who want you silenced? Yes, Cirrus said, but we'll spend those lives actually threatening the systems that profit from our people's deaths. That's preferable to the alternative. Corporal Vale, I spared Captain Valen because killing her felt wrong. Letting the conspiracy continue while I stay silent would feel worse. I'm willing to accept the consequences. Castellan nodded slowly. She turned to Colonel Hayes. Do you challenge the validity of the mercy right invocation? Hayes looked at Ethan, at Cirrus, at the evidence displayed across multiple screens. His expression suggested internal warfare between duty to command and recognition that the conspiracy was real. No, he said finally. I don't challenge it, but I reserve the right to pursue disciplinary action through appropriate channels. High Marshal Kreven. Kreven's skin had gone pale with suppressed rage. I challenge everything about this travesty, but I'm apparently in no position to press the challenge. He stood. This proceeding is illegitimate. You're free to leave, Castellan said calmly, but your departure will be recorded as implicit acceptance of the right's validity. Kreven stormed out, followed by several other Savathi officials. Their departures were captured by every media drone present. Castellan waited until the chamber settled again. By the authority vested in me by the Interspecies Diplomatic Corps, and in accordance with Savathi legal tradition as recognized under treaty provisions, I declare the mercy right sanctified. Corporal Ethan Vale and Captain Cirrus Valen are recognized as consort witnesses with all attendant rights, protections, and obligations. She paused. May you both survive the significance of what you've just done. The aftermath was controlled chaos. Some officials were immediately detained based on the evidence presented. Others fled the station and were declared wanted for questioning. The media storm was instantaneous. The story spreading across human and Savathi space faster than official attempts to suppress it. Ethan and Cirrus were escorted to secured quarters, while both governments figured out what to do with them. They weren't quite prisoners, weren't quite free, weren't quite anything the legal systems knew how to categorize. Dr. Osmond visited that evening, bringing actual good coffee and a datapad full of legal analysis. Congratulations! You've created the biggest diplomatic incident in 30 years, and possibly saved the alliance from collapsing into full war. The historians are going to have a field day with this. How much trouble are we in? Ethan asked. Significant. But also you're now too visible to quietly eliminate. The conspiracy works in shadows. You've dragged it into light. She handed them the datapad. Preliminary investigations are confirming your evidence. Multiple arrests on both sides. Some officials are cooperating to save themselves, which is providing even more evidence. What happens to us? Cirrus asked. Legally complicated. Your consort witnesses, which gives you standing but also makes you problematic for both governments. Current thinking is to assign you as permanent liaisons. Joint positions where you work together to implement the transparency the Mercy Right is supposed to create. So we get to do the most dangerous job in interstellar relations, Ethan said. Essentially, yes, but you'll be doing it together with legal standing and with enough public visibility that assassination becomes politically costly. Dr. Osmond smiled. It's not ideal, but it's survival with purpose, which is better than most people get. After she left, Ethan and Cirrus sat in their secured quarters looking at the datapad outlining their probable futures. We're going to spend our lives as bridges between our species, Cirrus said, making sure the conspiracy can't rebuild, preventing the kind of profitable war that killed so many. Yeah, it's going to be exhausting and dangerous and probably thankless. But necessary, Ethan agreed. Cirrus's skin shifted through colors he'd learned meant contemplation mixed with determination. In my culture, warriors earn honor through combat, but you've shown me that sometimes the greatest battles are fought without weapons, against systems rather than soldiers. In my culture, we're supposed to follow orders and not ask uncomfortable questions. You've shown me that sometimes asking questions is more important than following orders. They sat in companionable silence for a while, two people from different species who'd accidentally become partners in threatening the status quo. Ethan, Cirrus said, first time she'd used his given name. Thank you for not making it quick, for choosing the harder path, for showing me that mercy can be strength rather than weakness. Thank you for honoring that choice, for not letting it be meaningless, for being willing to stand with me when standing against me would have been easier. Outside their window, Driva VII rotated slowly, the moon where this had all begun, where Ethan had refused to shoot a defeated enemy and accidentally invoked ancient law, where Cirrus had asked for death and received mercy instead. The border conflict didn't end that day. Systems that entrenched took time to dismantle, but the conspiracy maintaining it had been exposed, and the people profiting from perpetual warfare were facing justice. And two warriors, one human, one Savathi, had become the living embodiment of what the Mercy Right was designed to create. Bridges built through courage and maintained through trust. 1 year later, the Joint Liaison Office existed in bureaucratic limbo, technically part of both human and Savathi military structures, practically independent of both. It occupied a small station at the edge of the contested border zone, staffed by personnel from both species who'd volunteered for the most diplomatically complicated assignment in recent history. Lieutenant Ethan Vale, promoted after the conspiracy trials concluded, sat at a desk reviewing intelligence sharing protocols with Captain Cirrus Valen, who'd been reinstated to her rank after Savathi High Command underwent extensive restructuring. The supply convoy is running 3 hours behind schedule, Cirrus said, highlighting the logistics report. Human contractors are blaming Savathi Customs delays. Savathi Customs is blaming human documentation errors. So normal operations, Ethan said. I'll contact the contractors. You handle customs. We'll figure out which side is actually causing the delay and which is just covering for incompetence. This is what we do now. Logistics arbitration and bureaucratic mediation. Better than shooting at each other over manufactured conflicts. Cirrus's skin flickered through colors that Ethan had learned indicated agreement mixed with amusement. They developed their own communication hybrid over the past year, part verbal, part Savathi color expression, part shared experience that didn't need words. The border zone had changed significantly. Joint patrols operated under combined command. Trade routes that had been battlegrounds were now secured by integrated security forces. The conspiracy's dismantling had revealed that most of the irreconcilable differences between species had been manufactured by people who profited from conflict. Turned out humans and Savathi got along fine when their governments weren't actively trying to make them enemies. Lieutenant Chen visited monthly with supplies and news from human command. Your old squad is serving in joint operations now. Martinez says the betting pool has evolved. Current odds are on how long until you two are running your own intelligence division. Tell Martinez I'm insulted he's only giving us 2 years, Ethan said. He's optimistic. Some people are betting 6 months. Chen handed him a data crystal. Also, this is from Colonel Hayes. He wanted you to have it. The crystal contained a personal message. Hayes had retired from active command but had testified extensively during the conspiracy trials. His message was brief. You were right, Vale. Some hills are worth dying on. Turns out neither of us had to. Good work, Hayes. He could have just sent a text, Ethan muttered. Where's the dramatic significance in that? Chen grinned. Also, you've officially been nominated for the Interspecies Cooperation Medal, which comes with a ceremony you'll hate and media attention you'll despise. Outstanding, love that for me. After Chen left, Ethan showed Cirrus the message from Hayes. She read it, her skin shifting through contemplative colors. Your former commander respects you now. That's significant in human military culture, yes. Yeah, it means he recognized that following my conscience wasn't insubordination. It was doing the job properly when the official job was wrong. Similar situation with High Marshal Creven's replacement. She transmitted commendation for my service. Acknowledged that the mercy rite represented traditional Savathi values, honor and courage, even though it violated modern doctrine. They worked through the afternoon, handling the unglamorous but essential task of making cooperation function in practice rather than just theory. It wasn't heroic. Nobody was writing songs about logistics coordination or customs dispute resolution. But it mattered. Every successful convoy, every resolved misunderstanding, every joint operation that functioned properly was proof that the conspiracy's lies weren't inevitable truth. That evening, they stood on the station's observation deck watching ships from both species transit the border zone peacefully. Human and Savathi vessels moving through space that had been a battlefield, now secured by cooperation rather than threat. Do you regret it? Cirrus asked. Choosing mercy that day in the crater, your life would be simpler if you just followed protocol. Ethan thought about the question. His life had become complicated beyond anything he'd imagined, constantly navigating between 2 governments, always visible as the human who'd invoked the mercy rite, forever linked to Cirrus through bonds that neither fully understood but both honored. No, he said, simple would have meant letting you die and watching the conspiracy continue. Complicated means actually changing things. He paused. What about you? Regret accepting the right instead of honorable death? Every day, Cirrus said. Then her skin flickered through colors that indicated she was joking. No, death would have been easier. But this building bridges, preventing wars, threatening systems that deserve to be threatened, this is better. Even when it's exhausting. A message came through from the joint patrol. Another successful operation. No incidents. coordination functioning smoothly, small victories that accumulated into something larger. Lieutenant Vale, Captain Valen, the patrol commander reported, joint operations continuing nominal, no complications, requesting permission to extend patrol route through the disputed mining corridor. Permission granted, Ethan replied. Stay safe out there. After the communication ended, Cirrus looked at him with an expression he'd learned meant she was about to say something significant. What? He asked. I was thinking about that moment in the crater. When I asked you to make it quick, part of me expected death. Part of me hoped for mercy, but I never imagined mercy would lead to this, to partnership, to actually changing the systems that demanded one of us die. Yeah, Ethan agreed. Turns out mercy is more complicated and more powerful than either of our governments wanted us to know. They returned to their office and continued the work, handling disputes, facilitating cooperation, slowly building the trust that prevented profitable wars. It was tedious. It was essential. It was exactly what the mercy rite had been designed to create. And two warriors from different species, bound by an ancient tradition invoked through compassion, were proving that sometimes the most important battles aren't fought with weapons. They're fought with the stubborn refusal to let broken systems stay broken. Even when everyone is telling you that following protocol is easier, that mercy is weakness, that one person can't change entrenched power structures. Sometimes, especially then, mercy becomes the most powerful weapon available. And sometimes the bravest thing a warrior can do is refuse to fight. 2 years later, the interspecies cooperation medal ceremony was exactly as terrible as Ethan had anticipated. Formal attire that didn't fit quite right, speeches that went on too long, media attention that made him want to hide in a maintenance closet. But Cirrus stood beside him on the stage, her formal armor polished to reflective brilliance, her skin cycling through proud colors, and that made it bearable. Ambassador Castellan presented the medals, her voice carrying across the assembled dignitaries. Lieutenant Ethan Vale and Captain Cirrus Valen demonstrated that courage isn't always found in combat. Sometimes it's found in refusing combat, in choosing mercy over protocol, in threatening powerful systems through simple honesty. She placed the medal around Ethan's neck, then Cirrus's. You've both earned something more valuable than recognition. You've earned the right to continue this work, to keep building bridges, to keep preventing the kind of profitable warfare that serves corporations instead of citizens. The ceremony ended eventually. Ethan and Cirrus escaped to a balcony overlooking the diplomatic station's central hub, watching ships from a dozen species transit peacefully. 2 years ago, I was a corporal guarding doors, Ethan said. Now I'm a decorated liaison officer who accidentally threatens military-industrial complexes. Life got weird. 2 years ago, I was resigned to death in a crater, Cirrus replied. Now I'm a living symbol of interspecies cooperation and ancient legal traditions. I understand weird. They stood in comfortable silence, two people who'd become partners through accident and choice, bound by mercy and maintained by trust. Ethan, Cirrus said eventually, thank you for every day since the crater, for choosing the harder path, for staying stubborn when everyone told you to quit. Thank you for making it worth it, for standing with me, for being the kind of warrior who values mercy alongside honor. Below them the station hummed with activity. Humans and Savathi working together, trade flowing freely, joint operations protecting civilians, small victories that accumulated into peace. It wasn't perfect. Conflicts still emerged. Old prejudices persisted. The conspiracy's remnants occasionally attempted